Hello there, everybody. Welcome back. The time is 1 a.m., and this is the second time we're trying to record this podcast because we were a good 35 minutes into it, and then I realised that it's my own fault. Right next to Grimsby, as you can probably see on my screen if you're watching this, I put the word in capital letters cheats. I guess you could maybe say that, but it depends how maybe others might see it, and I'm sort of thinking the bigger picture on that. But look, we're cheats, and we know we are, of course, fielding an illegible player against Man United, but we haven't been kicked out of the cup, thankfully. We've been fined and pretty much been given a slap on the wrist and been told not to do it again. But look, the memories of that night remain. Thank God for that. But anyway, we've got Luke for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to get to this episode actually, just because it's
You
something
probably hate me.
Nah, you're all good. Let's be real. I my sleep schedule doesn't exist. I just go through.
Well, we know that.
Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I've literally got home from work, got straight onto here to record. But yeah, it's something a little bit different today. So it's a fun one. And we're probably gonna upset a lot of people because we're probably not going to place their clubs where they want them. And given where my club is, I may have a little bit of an arrogant streak about me today. Let's see.
You just probably guess anyway. But look, first of all, brace yourselves. Second of all, yes, this we are going to be ranking every club's transfer window from 24th place to first place, as you'd normally get from the predictions. And usually, like the predictions, myself, Luke, Jake, and Jack, not Kieran, he's dealing with sheep, um, put together our list of 1 to 24 of basically who we think have had the best transfer window, and once those all been together, we've worked out an average position, and we're gonna share it with you of what we think. Now we've been looking through these, and I can't necessarily say that I personally, or probably Luke, probably agrees with some of these, but that's the way the average goes. And there's not really much I can really say, really. So look, these are what we say will be our opinions, but of course we've got to put them somewhere, and just going off that, that's just what it is. You might have to forgive me. I'm still suffering with a sore throat from when, even still, I mean, good God, it's just ridiculous at this stage. I might have to go and get it checked out or something like that. But look, if you're new around here, subscribe, download pods wherever you get it from. Of course, let us know your thoughts. Thanks to Skybet for sponsoring this podcast. Let's get straight onto it. I'm waffling enough with it being late. In 24th place, I think there's but one or two teams that could have gone here, but Cheltenham have gone here. Couple of names I don't mind. I think Sam Sherring, if you can keep him fit, is a very good addition at centre back. Isaac Hutchinson was a very smart addition, signing on loan yesterday from Bristol Rovers. God, I'm really not feeling it. But there's a couple of names in there, and I'm just not sure it's the quality of some of those names. I'm still unsure of the likes of Leanne Goal, the likes of Josh Martin. I mean, you see some of the departures as well. I mean, Ethan Archer's moved on. I say moved on. Luton have signed him. They've got a bit of money in there, and they're keeping him till January. But really, I think maybe the other big one is Tom Bradby going to Harrogate, a league rival. I'm just not sure they've really strengthened. There's a lot of names there. There's a lot of players in on loan. I mean, Ryan Broom, they'll know well. Robbie Cundy can be half decent at this level. Um, like I said, I think even with the Hutchinson signing, I really wasn't sold on this. But I think I think there's maybe one or two clubs that could have gone bottom. But I think in terms of Cheltenham, I mean, I'm not really surprised, to be honest. I think their start to the season sort of reflects that. But even then, I'm just not. I'm not convinced on a lot of that, actually.
I think a lot of it comes down to just the whole strategy of their window, and I appreciate that. A lot of that's kind of been down to the whole thing with the takeover. Whether it was going to happen, whether it well, obviously it has now happened, quite late in the day, and I don't think it's necessarily helped things to be honest just yet. These things can take time to settle. As you mentioned, the big loss was Tom Bradbury, not just a decent centre back, but club captain, big leadership figure going to a side that you could maybe expect to be in a similar area of the table, or at least based on last season, you'd perhaps expect so. Um, and yeah, I think there's just a lot of panicking going on with the signings. You've got 7 loan players there. You can only name 5 in a matchday squad. Uh, Straight away, you've got 2 players there at a minimum that you just can't have in the lineup. Um, and again, you have to kind of question the quality. When was the last time Josh Martin had a successful spell anywhere in the EFL? Yeah, respectfully, I think everywhere he's gone, he's been pretty poor. Certainly since he was with us, and that was a good few years ago now. Lee Angle's been relegated a couple of times in a row, can score a couple of goals, but not the most convincing record. Someone like Sam Sherring, I will touch on him because obviously one of our players hasn't exactly set the world alight. He missed most of the season with injuries and illnesses, which obviously not his fault. But even when he has played, he hasn't necessarily been great. I think it's kind of summed up by the fact that a couple of minutes into his debut, he went and scored an own goal. But yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around that club at the minute, and even something which isn't necessarily a transfer, just the injury to Jordan Thomas as well, and they've not necessarily replaced him or brought in a short-term solution to that either. There's just so many concerns around Cheltenham for me.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair. But yeah, let's move on. Again, we're in and out like this. Yeah, it's late, it's early morning, and we're talking about Accrington Stanley being 23rd in our ranking transfer windows pods. But I think there's one name on there I think is probably better than most of what Cheltenham have done, and that's Paddy Madden. An experienced head can still probably get you a few goals at this level. I really don't mind that pickup, even for a season on loan at Chesterfield. You see the other players that they brought in. There's a lot of loan players in there, a lot of young lads. A couple of lads in there that have come in from non-league. I think Freddie Sasser started all right. Ollie Wright, he looked pretty good against us, to be fair. Very much a towering figure in goal. But ultimately, when you look at the departures, no one really big other than Ben Woods, who is obviously a big departure. Has gone to Peterborough, gone for an undisclosed fee. And have they really replaced him? Probably not. I think these could have. I think maybe if they didn't sign Madden, they'd have gone bottom. I think fairly easily. Um, yeah, there's a lot of young lads in there. There's a lot of. I mean, you're already putting it with Accrington's squad, which on paper is not incredible anyway, and it hasn't really been with the greatest respect. And I think there's sort of budgetary constraints. Look, they don't have the biggest budget in the league. Let's pick no bones about it. Um, Obviously with the whole situation with Andy Holt at the minute and whatnot. But there's a lot of names that are new to EFL football as well, and it'll be another difficult season for Accrington as well. I mean, ultimately their aim is to survive. We'll have to see how they do, but in terms of names, like I said, other than really Paddy Madden, I think he lives it quite a bit. Not a lot, and not particularly. There's no real big names. Let's put it that way, other than him, maybe.
Well, yeah, they've done what they can with what they have, and it's just a case that they don't have many resources to make much more happen. Hence, why they're restricted to frees and loans. They don't have the money to do anything else. They've lost their academy because they don't have the money, uh, and that makes things very, very tricky. The Paddy Madden one is absolutely huge. Yeah, he'd be a good pickup for a lot of sides higher up in the division, or what you'd expect, or higher sides you would expect to be higher up in the division. Um, and someone like that could be the difference between survival and losing your EFL status. It's just the rest of these signings are very high risk, very, very high risk. And of course, there might maybe a diamond in the rough there. We don't know until we obviously see more of them, but yeah, it's just a lot of uncertainty. There's not much EFL experience there. I appreciate they've got some already within the squad, but you would have hoped for a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's only so much you can really say with some of those players, considering that we've not really seen them. Yeah, certainly in and around this level. In 22nd, we've gone for Newport County now. In terms, I think this is probably where they were. I think they started the transfer window quite well, and there's some decent names in there. I quite like the signing of Matt Smith. Nick Zanev started life there really well. I think Lee Jenkins fits in really well. As a big towering defender as he is. Liam Shepherd's obviously got previous experience at Newport, so I'm sure that was a welcome addition for them. I think Ogunye is not a bad addition as well. But I think you look at some of the departures they've had. Nick Townsend's moved on. Aaron Wildig's moved on. A couple of others in there. Shane McLaughlin as well is a big name for them. There's a lot of experience that they've moved on in that squad. And I'm not saying that there's no experience in the players that they've brought in. But they're obviously losing a massive chunk of that. And that's what they just haven't done that. I was always concerned about Newport. I think Kieran was. I think if you saw his tweet the other day, I think he had every right to be concerned. I mean, 2 editions in on deadline day. Um, if any, I think there's maybe arguments that maybe they have got weaker, but I don't really know what any of you guys think or anything like that. Like I said, I think Sanev, the likes of Sanev and Smith, good signings. I don't mind them at all, but I think if you probably look at it from the experience point and the fact that they've not had the best 5 or 6 games already this season, I think I'm trying to take league starts out of the equation, but it's really hard to sort of see if they've really improved, and even if they have, I honestly think it's very minimal. To be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I've said from the start, I just don't rate the signings at all. Uh, Matt Smith was never particularly good for us. I'm sure he's obviously had a bit of experience since, playing up in Scotland for a while, and I know he's got a few more games under his belt now. And then you've also got someone like Nick Zanev, who, for me, has historically been quite poor. Uh, but I mean, obviously, I do respect he's had a decent start to life this season. Lee Jenkins did actually look decent when we played Newport the other week, but it's the
I was
experience.
impressed
I
with him
can't
when
get
we
over the
played him.
experience.
To be fair, I was
Yeah,
impressed with him when we played.
I just can't get over the experience though. I think that's the big issue. You lose like a Townsend, who's a leadership figure in that group, and you haven't replaced that experience. Shane McLaughlin, as you mentioned as well. Uh, and yes, they've replaced it with players that are, you know, at a similar stage in their career, but not necessarily ones that have played as many games or have the same type of experience. I'd say you don't have any leaders in that group, in my opinion. Uh, and yeah, I'm just not necessarily convinced that the quality is there. Again, there's a couple of lone players that could come good, of course. That can be the nature of a loan signing. You're bringing in a player with high potential. Sometimes they're going to be hits, but sometimes obviously you're going to be misses as well. So there's that risk element. But in terms of proven quality, I don't think there is any in these Newport incomings.
Yeah, okay. Right, let's move on to 21st. Crawley were never going to be high. Let's be perfectly honest. Another summer of a pretty mad turnover. You see the players that have moved on first of all. The likes of Russian Hepburn Murphy's gone to MK. Toby Malaki's gone to Fleetwood. Panucci Kamara has moved on. Will Swan has started life at Bradford excellently, bagging them in at League One level. But you look at the players that they have brought in as well, and there's a lot of them. There's 1 or 2 good names in there. Jay Williams, trusted by Scott Lindsay, obviously gone back to Crawley from MK. That's a good signing. I like that. Kabongo Shamanga, on paper, can be a good signing. I think he's really yet to hit the ground running. But even then, I think you look at some of the others. Scott Malone obviously brings that much needed experience, I think. But one thing I see straight away, there's a lot of risks in there. Reece Brown hasn't had a club for well over a year. Harry McCurdy, I know he's had his issues. I think he's had heart problem or anything like that. I know he got a brace at the weekend, which was great for him. But that signing always came with an element of risk. I think even Bajrami has been out injured for a long time. Um, and yeah, again, it's probably a little bit of a risk. I mean, Dion Pereira, he's sort of been a bit in and out in terms of the leagues as well. I think he spent more time recently in non-league. Um, and overall, I just don't think it's glittered with quality. Ryan Loft signing on loan from deadline day. I don't think he's their answer. I just don't think what they've done is really that impressive at all, to be honest. And even with the players that they currently do have, there's one or two half decent names in there, but I I just don't rate what they've done, and it could reflect. It sort of does reflect that with the start a little bit, and I think it could reflect that going into the season. I think they'll I think they'll struggle, Crawley. I really think they'll do. Um, there's quite a lot of stuff missing in that. Like I said, I don't mind one or two signings that they have made on there, but I guess when you have, you know, this these summers of transitions, they're just not healthy. I know we've mentioned it a few times. I'm sure Luke will mention it, but I think even like I said, the stuff they have done, I'm really not sold on quite a lot of it at all.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to do more than touch on it. I'm going to have to bring it up again because it's so crucial to everything they're doing. Why would you voluntarily put yourself into another transition season when you don't need to? Yeah, I appreciate they've gone through a relegation. A couple of these players probably would have left anyway to go back up a division or something like that, but they've made no effort to keep any of the players that would have done a good job in this league, you know, and they've then replaced those players with, aside from Jay Williams, players that yes have a point to prove, but they have a point to prove because they are unproven, uh, or haven't had a good couple of seasons or something like that. There's a lot of there's a lot of work to be done to turn this group of players into a good team. It is probably the way I'd put it. It's putting a lot of pressure on Scott Lindsay, a lot of pressure on his coaching staff to get the best out of these players. Because aside from that, from the Jay Williams pickup, that it's just all either unproven or relatively poor couple of seasons, and it's just too difficult to get past that. That I just really dislike the strategy, and I've made that clear over a number of weeks at this point.
Yeah, and let's not make it any more clearer. It is what it is now. Crawley coming at 21st. Now in 20th might be a slightly controversial one. Shrewsbury Town have gone here. I think you look at the names that they have brought in, and on paper, there's some pretty good names in there. I mean, Tom Anderson, Doncaster Rovers promotion experience. Sam Clucas on a free from Lincoln has played at the top level, has played Premier League football, has got very good experience. Tom Sang from Port Vale, of course, promotion experience. Sam Stubbs, South spells at Bradford and obviously Cheltenham close by. Will Boyle was at Wrexham. Anthony Scully, has played in the league above for Michael Appleton. Um, and I don't mind some of the loans in there. Tommy McDermott looks half decent. Bradley from Peterborough, I'm not going to say his last name. And in terms of the players that they've let go, there's one or two names maybe that that could do a job, or a very good job in League Two. Maybe the likes of Dominic Gape, as we'll mention a little bit with Colchester, David Wheeler. I mean, how he's getting on now, Jamal Blackman. There's good names in there. My thing about it, I think it's more stylistic fits because you see Michael Appleton has sort of got maybe a system in mind. I think he's sort of been promoted to manager. I think he dealt with the last few signings because of um one of the members of the club left. I think it was their director of football, Mickey Moore. Is it? I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, they just don't feel right. I don't. It's hard to really pinpoint on it because, like I say, I think there is potential of these that could have been higher. I think maybe in this instance, I think if you look at like I said, these are averages. And if you sort of look at it, maybe they are too low down. And I think we maybe might have done them a little bit of a disservice. But I think you maybe factor in at the start of the season that they've had. Like I said, we're trying to avoid that as much as we can. Well, I certainly tried to anyway when I tried to do mine. And they've sort of just ended up here. Personally, I'd have had them slightly higher. I'm not sure how much higher though. Certainly, there's certainly names that are glittered with experience. I'm just wondering in terms of maybe the other side to that game. It's all well having that. I'm just thinking more of the other little bits of it, the more sort of tidiness, if that sort of makes sense. That's sort of where I'm thinking with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does come down to more of a stylistic thing than the actual players themselves. Uh, I look at a lot of those outgoings and I think, what they'd have done a good job in League Two, but a season ago I'd probably have said the same thing. Oh, they'll do a good job in League One. So it's more about the losing culture and getting rid of that because there are players there that probably could have done a job, but maybe just weren't the right fit for the club, and that can happen sometimes. Um, Again, like some of the signings, I do like the look of a lot of them. Klukas, Anderson, Stubbs. We've gone through these. They on the face of it, they make sense. It's just whether they're going to fit into this side and change the culture enough to turn them into a solid squad again and get them going the right way up the table rather than struggling at the bottom of it. And obviously, we don't want to be too knee jerk and say, oh, well, this clearly isn't working. We're 6 games in and they're near the bottom. But I'm not necessarily convinced that they've got the right players for what they want to do. But this is easily one where we could be proven wrong.
That's the thing, and I sort of want to in that. And like I said, I think it's probably one in which he's probably capable of going higher. And I think the average has maybe done them a little bit of a disservice. Barrow come in at 19th, maybe one that maybe they have done. The averages have done them a little bit of a disservice. I think let's have a look at some of the names they've brought in. Ben Whitfield for the 7,000th time. Look, he's always going to be a very good player in League Two. No issue with that. I mean, the likes of Tom Barkhalson, experience at championship level, that's a good signing. Even the likes of Charlie Raglan and Jack Earing, the solid signings for the level. In terms of, I've always mentioned in terms of risks, I saw that with Crawley. I see some elements of that with Barrow. I mean, Tyler Walker, I think he started off okay, but obviously given his injury record, you always got that side to it. Reece Healy, I think he was injured 11 minutes into his debut, poor lad. Of course, a player that should be nowhere near League Two on his day, but injuries have sort of got in the way there. And maybe one or two others. I mean, look, Josh Gordon knows the club well. He's been there before. Regan Booty's deserved that step up from non-league. Lewis Shipley started okay as well. Raheem Harper's obviously played in League Two with Port Vale last year. But I think maybe why they're so low is probably the outgoings. Perhaps that's maybe what others have seen. Dean Campbell to Northampton, Keane Spence to Rotherham, Robbie Gotts to Doncaster. Oh, straight off the bat, they're three massive departures. There's obviously been a lot going on at Barrow this year. Have they replaced him? I don't know. Maybe. I think Jack Earing's a good fit. Like I said, I think we can maybe fill that void. Is he as good as maybe any of them? Probably not, but still a half decent fit either way. A couple of other names have moved on. Emil Aqua's moved on for an undisclosed fee. Fia Vassell's still a free agent. I'm surprised he's not been picked up yet. I think he's a very good defender in League Two for anyone really, especially ones that I think wants to play a progressive way. Look, I don't mind what they've done. There's a few bits I like. There's a few bits I'm unsure of. Obviously, the departures would have hurt them. Losing them for free as well. Maybe could have been higher. I debate how much higher, though. I think maybe the jury's out for this one, for one or two. I don't hate it. I don't particularly love a bit of it either. I don't know. I'm very much on the fence on this one with a few. It's all right. it's all right considering what they've gone through. I think.
Well, yeah, I think personally, I had these a few places higher because I do like a lot of the incomings at Barrow, namely the Reece Healy one. Again, very unfortunate with the injury, but someone of his quality, I would have had him back at Dons in a heartbeat, and I think that says something with some of the players that we've got in our squad at the minute. They've got a very, very good player there if the big if they can keep him fit, and that is the case as you mentioned with a couple of those players. But there's a lot of proven EFL experience in there, which I do like. It's just as you say that big midfield trio all going in the same season. That's quite the hit to take, and realistically, that's the only reason they're this low. Essentially, that's an entire section of your squad that is now entirely new and suddenly has to fit into the system uh, and it won't necessarily click straight away. But I do think they're in a promising enough position that I could see this squad actually working out quite well.
Hmm. Right, let's move on to 18th place. Oldham Athletic come here now. Straight off the bat, I'd have put Barrow above these. Obviously, we're going off averages. Let's have a look at some of the additions that they have made. We were crying out the other day in terms of maybe their goal scoring problems. Michael Mellon came in on loan on deadline day. I think he's Mickey Mellon's son, isn't he? Um, but if they can recapture the Michael Mellon that was on loan at Morecambe a few years ago. Um, it'll be a very useful asset for them. I don't mind some of their stuff. Ryan Woods brings in good experience. Um, Josh Hawkes is a very good player, I think, at League Two level. Um, and there's no real massive names in there. There's a lot of players in there that I would say do a job. I think they do a job. I think I mentioned the other day. I think maybe if this was 5 odd years ago or anything like that, I think their business would have been out as well. There's a lot of names in there than which I think Mickey Mellon trusts. There's a lot of names that he's signed again, and there's nothing really against that. Um, but I mean, they've put all this together. I tell you what, it's been quite a large turnover at Oldham in a short space of time. Obviously, with them being promoted, and you see some of the names that they have moved on. Um, the likes of James Norwood. I think he was a big earner at Oldham anyway, but he's gone to Fleetwood. Even the likes of Joe Pritchard's in there. Sean Hobson. A couple of names. Charlie Raglin as well. It's a pretty big name for them. Josh Lundstrom. I think players that are very capable of playing League Two have moved on. It's not the worst business in the world. And I think, to be fair, to Oldham's credit, I think to do all that in a short space of time, because obviously they were a good month behind schedule compared to everyone else, just with how the National League playoffs work. I know the feeling too well. To put all that together in that sort of space of time is pretty impressive, but I question maybe in some aspects maybe if they have improved. I'm not denying there's a lot of experience in that squad, but I just don't think there's much groundbreaking. That's sort of my thing with it. And as I mentioned before, I know Barrow were 19th, but I'd have put Barrow higher than these personally. I know I'm probably going to get some stick from Oldham fans for that, but that's just how I see it.
I mean, I had Barrow above them as well. To be fair, um, yeah, I mean, credit to them for doing so much in such a short space of time, but I actually think they've done too much. As you say, there are a lot of players that have left Oldham that could have done a job, and they didn't necessarily need to get rid of them. I think there's a lot to be said for stability. I look at a club like Bromley. I recognise that in Bromley's case, they didn't have the resources to make many more changes, but I think in a way that kind of helped them, and well, it did help them because they were only a few points off playoffs last season. Uh, I just think there's a lot of unnecessary outgoings with Oldham, and they've kind of replaced with like for like in terms of quality. I don't think they've necessarily upgraded as such. Obviously, a few of them they have released, or let go fringe players and replaced them with slightly better players. That's absolutely fine. That's what I'd expect them to do. But I think there were first teamers there that didn't necessarily need to leave. In terms of the incomings, again, it just feels a little bit average. In like I said, if you're going to get rid of these players, replace him with ones that are notably better and notably improve your squad. You don't want to disrupt the squad for the sake of it. Um, but that being said, I do like the Michael Mellon pickup, the father son link up, and hey, maybe with him in the lineup, they'll finally stop missing open goals. But I guess we'll wait and see.
Let's see, shall we? Right, let's move on to 17th. You were going on about how you were surprised when we were sort of having a look at these before we started that Harrogate Town are as low as 17th. And to be fair, I quite like what they've done. There's a lot of names in there that I feel suit a Simon Weaver team, if you know what I mean. Connor McCartney, I think, is a very smart pickup. Mason Bennett's obviously played much higher up. Tom Bradbury is a very solid signing, joining from Cheltenham Town, a league rival. Reece Smith has started life there pretty well. Same as Sean Mikulski. Lewis Cass, Jack Evans has joined there. Jacob Slater's probably a player I don't know too much about, signing on loan from Brighton. And you look at some of the outgoings, no one massively huge other than really Josh March, who's gone to Crewe, has started life there pretty well. I mean, Dean Cornelius, Matty Daly, Matty Folds, Stephen Dooley, James Daly moving on. I mean, good names and been good servants to Harrogate, but no, I'm really, I like what they've done. It's not too flashy. It's not too incredible. There's no proper standout names as you probably expect. I mean, Harrogate, not the biggest club in the league by any stretch, probably don't have the biggest budget. But we go on about style, and stylistically, I feel quite a lot of these are a good fit. And like I said, we're going off averages. 17th, I think these. I know you were raving about them. You put them quite high in yours. These could have been slightly higher, to be honest. Not a lot of it, but efficient business, and that's what I quite like about it.
Well, not just efficient, I'd say it's intelligent as well. I had Harrogate as high as eighth in my personal ranking. Uh, I really like what they've done. They've not had to break the bank, but they've brought in reasonable quality. They've got some proven EFL experience there. Someone like Mason Bennett, as you've mentioned, Tom Bradbury, a leadership figure from a League Two rival. That's fantastic to get him in on a free. You've given two of the Maidenhead attackers a chance to step up. They were doing decent numbers in the National League and absolutely earned the step up to League Two. Yeah, I think it's very very intelligent business. It's hard to criticize it too much. I just think that there are a couple of risks there, of course, but I don't think they've taken unnecessary risks. Is the way I'd put it. They've played it safe. They've made intelligent signings, and I could see this coming together quite nicely. The only thing, as you say, that's a bit of a downside in terms of the outgoings is Josh March, and they've brought in two or three players that I think could fill that void. Obviously, it's hard to you know uh, replace him necessarily in one player, but I think with a couple of players in that squad, I think they've done that. Uh, I think there's a lot to be positive about. And if you look at the list there, it's not too many signings either. It's not too much turnover. It's a case of they're still a stable club. They've just made some additions that I do genuinely think improve them.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. Certainly, they have improved. Right, okay, let's move on to 16th. Colchester come here. Now, we was singing our praises with Colchester last season in some of the additions that they have made, and I still stand by it. They had an excellent transfer window. The Danny Kelly effect right there. In terms of the players that they brought in this year, I mean, not as flashy names, not as certainly big. I think they've had like a budget cut or something like that. It was always going to be, I mean, Jack Tucker signing permanently from MK Dons. He loves a goal at the minute. As we've gone on about him, I think Will Goodwin could be a good fit for a Danny Cowley side. Dominic Gate feels that way too. Jack Baldwin brings experience from higher up. Obviously, Ben Perry, was a good signing, but obviously, frustrated with the injury. It looks like it'll keep him out for the season, which is frustrating. And there's a lot of exciting loanies in there that I'm intrigued more than anything. I think it's really hard to really judge those sort of loanies. I think one of them in particular, I think it's Micah and Bick. signing on loan from Chelsea. I think he came with excellent pedigree or something like that. Um, so I'm intrigued more to see with some of those names, but I think you also look at the outgoings as well. Obviously, Lyle Taylor's moved on. Probably could have done another year in League Two. I think he's very capable of that. He had a good season for Colchester last year. I mean, Oscar Thorne's gone to Lincoln and they've made a bit of money for him. I mean, Goodliff and Kelleher moved on. But I think what makes their business stand out even more is the fact that they haven't really lost anyone. You know, the likes of Jack Payne's still there, Ted Bishop, a couple of others. I mean, I really like Warrior Edwards. You know, he's still there. Um, again, not as flashy, and again, probably could have been slightly higher. Probably not much though. Keeping a lot of those players is a big positive, and they've clearly built on that. As you can say, there is. I think they've improved. I certainly think that, but it certainly wasn't extreme as last year. And I'm saying that sounds harsh. I think there's still a very good squad there.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are certainly some very good players in that squad. I think what I'm not convinced with is the quality and depth. Obviously they started the season with Jack Payne injured and immediately the side doesn't look as good. Uh, I think there are vulnerabilities in that side somewhere. I don't mind some of the signings. I certainly wouldn't have expected Jack Tucker to be as good as he has been. Whether he can maintain that, I don't know. Uh, I mean, obviously, if he can, he's a fantastic defender on his day. It's just keeping him confident because he is a heavily confidence based player. If he makes a mistake, that can sometimes throw him, and that could be it for the game. But for his sake, I do hope he does well. Um, as you say, they've kept their key players. I'm just not necessarily convinced there's enough additional quality in some of these signings. I think the big one was Ben Perry, but then is almost a non-signing because he's now injured for pretty much the season. So it's a difficult one. I can see why they would be placed higher, but at the same time, I can see why they're here as well.
Perfect. Right, let's move on to 15th. And again, maybe a slightly controversial one. Barnet come here. Obviously, one of the two newly promoted sides. First of all, I look at their outgoings. No one really big, other than maybe Aluwo, has gone to Salford, started life excellently there. I don't think they've really lost anyone spectacularly big in terms of outgoings. But you look at some of the incomes, and I really do like some of the business that they've done. Romany Critchlow, with Bradford, of course, promotion experience. Ollie Hawkins, big man at Gillingham, could play a couple of positions up front or even as a centre half. There's a lot of intelligent names in there, a couple of goalkeepers in there, Kieran Slicker, Owen Evans in there, a couple of strikers in Joe Hugill, probably not the best of times recently. Good to get the ground running. Kane Smith has got experience at this level and above with Stevenage. Dennis Adeniran has had time at Sheffield Wednesday. Good pickup. There's a lot of good pickups there. There's a couple from non-league as well that I quite like. Adam Senior I quite like. Osadebe, I think it's maybe conflicting reports from him when they signed him, but I didn't particularly mind that so much with a team like Barnet. I think they've certainly improved. There's a lot. They've done a lot. And I think maybe the start of the season has maybe sort of suggests that a little bit. I'm still under the impression they'll pick up. I've not got much doubts over Barnet, but genuinely speaking, I really do like some of the additions that they have made, and I think I do feel 15th on average is sort of quite harsh because I think these could have gone slightly higher without a doubt. Personally, I like what they've done.
I'll admit I was one of the ones that put these lower, and looking at this list now, I am regretting that. Uh, I can certainly see why they would be higher. I'm looking at the outgoings. I'm thinking, right, fringe player, another fringe player. They haven't necessarily lost anyone big, apart from, as you say, a Luo there. Um, but then they've replaced them with players that are proven for the level, or at least look like they have the potential to play well at League Two level. It's solid business. It's just there's a lot of it, and as you say, that can sometimes take time uh, to come together and to gel, the dreaded word. Um, yeah, there's a lot of signings I like there. I don't have too much more to say on it. I'm more just like, why did I put these quite as low as I did? Because I think I had them like 18th or 19th or something. But fair play. I think that they've had a decent window. It's just going to take time and patience with Barnett.
Yeah, I should probably expect. Right, moving on to 14th now. Straight away, sorting out all these, all these predictions. I say they're not predictions, are they? Sorting out the rankings and working out what the averages are between them. I'm surprised Notts County are 14th, and I don't mean that in a good way. I think these could have been lower, and I think they're quite lucky that they're quite high up here. Um, there are a few signings I do like. Don't get me wrong. I think Brian Cotter is half decent. I think Tom Iopenda has started life there really well. Same as Matt Dennis. He's really hit the ground running. Um, those signings I do like. I mean, Jaden Luke has got quality in spells. Um, and maybe a couple of others as well. Tyrese Hall, there's a lot of raving about him, but you see some of the players that have left. First of all, David McGoldrick, just big, isn't it? And I feel like Notts didn't do enough to keep him. That's just sort of the impression I get with that. Alex Bass has moved on. They've got a bit of money for him. And other than that, I think those are the two big ones, aren't there? I think quite a couple of them are sort of fringe players. I think Kyle Cameron has had a long affiliation with Notts County. But yeah, I mean, some of those names I'm really not sold on. Cal Roos, I'm really not sold on. Um, Maybe Cunha, but I think it's a big jump for him, isn't it? Bennett's, I think there's bits and pieces of him, but I feel like, if more than anything, I sort of feel for Martin Patterson a little bit. I mean, I didn't make any signings on deadline day yesterday, which I thought they needed to. I think they needed a couple more, really, at most, because there's elements to that squad which I just don't think they just don't feel right. And I think there's a lot of I think there's a couple of injuries going around at the minute, but I don't know. I just feel like maybe at times Patterson's been hung out to dry a little bit. So I sort of have some sympathy with that, obviously with him being the head coach. But I honestly don't think. I mean, look, losing a player like McGoldrick and Bass, they're two excellent players for League Two. I just don't think it was always going to be hard to replace McGoldrick anyway. But Bass, I think replacing him with someone like Roos, no, I disagree with that at all. Like I said, don't get me wrong. I don't think some of those signings are horrible. I've not even mentioned Norwood yet either. He brings some good experience. I just think for a side that's wanting to target promotion, because let's be honest, that's their aim. There's, I don't think, I don't think they've done anywhere near enough, and I feel like there's been, particularly at parts, I feel like they've shot themselves in the foot. I think that's what the big thing I can take from that. I'm just not impressed, truth be told.
I just don't like the strategy. For me, it's as simple as that. I don't like the strategy. This isn't the way that a promotion chasing side should operate in a transfer window. For me, they had 4 signings in before they even had a manager. That is ridiculous. Even signing one player before you have a manager, to me, is a poor decision. So to do it 4 times is ridiculous. I appreciate that someone like Norburn, who was amongst that group, is a decent player, but still, your manager might not have wanted him. Luckily, he did. It's just unnecessary poor decisions. And again, with the McGoldrick one, I think they easily could have kept him. Obviously, we don't necessarily know what was going on in the background there, but from what I gather, it sounds like they easily could have kept him in the ranks, and they just didn't. And someone like Bass, I appreciate that's more of a forced thing, but there were better, more proven goalkeepers with more recent EFL experience that perhaps could have done a better job than Roos. I think there's a reason he's been away from the EFL for a couple of seasons now at least. And it's just a case of they haven't replaced the big names properly at all. They haven't brought in other big names to cover for them. Um, Obviously, Matt Dennis has started the season brilliantly. I know he has quality because I saw him at Dons. The problem with him at Dons was always attitude, and that had kind of been the case wherever he'd gone. Maybe it's just a case that he's matured now, and if that's the case, they've got a very good player there. But it's still unproven. You can't say, right, that's McGoldrick. replaced because he's not. It's just not a proven way of operating in a window as a side that's supposed to have ambition. I think that's what frustrates me. Uh, I just don't think there's enough proven quality coming into this side at all.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay. We said what we need to say on Notts County. Let's move on to 13th. Now, Bromley come here. Not a lot of business, but I think it's super efficient what they've done. Straight off the bat, Mitch Pinnock, excellent signing. I think even someone like William Hondermark seems a very good fit. Even Carl Cameron just feels like a good fit. There's a couple of players in there that, a couple of younger lads, a couple of loanies in there. But I think one thing I like about Andy Woodman is the fact that I think he's very adaptable. I was full of praise for that the other day. He knows how to get tunes out of players, and like I said, I feel like they have improved. I think the Mitch Pinnock one, I think, is one of the best in League Two. I really do believe that. I think with someone of that calibre coming into a club like Bromley, I think is absolutely huge. I think Crowhouse had a spell there at Bromley previously, so that's a good addition for them. And you just see the clubs that they've got players on loan from. I think Brentford, Man City, Crystal Palace, because they had the right back's name who escapes me, who they had last season. Um, he was very good for them there. And in terms of outgoings, no one big. They've still got Michael Cheek, despite the earlier talk at the start of the season about where he could end up. I think there are mostly more fringe players that what they've let go there, and I've got no complaints with Bromley. I think they've done a very steady job. I think they're steady is probably the. I think they've done a good job. I'm not sure if I could maybe warrant them maybe being higher for maybe with maybe the amount of additions, but I like what they've done, and I feel like they're good fits.
Yeah, I'd probably have put them a little bit higher. The players they've got rid of are fringe players. The players they've kept are all the super important ones, as you say, Michael Sheep being the biggest of the bunch. Uh, and then there's some very smart business with the incomings as well. Mitch Pinnock, as you say, I'd go as far as saying if you take away the Don signings, Mitch Pinnock could well be the best signing in League Two. I genuinely think that is a fantastic pickup. Um, then you've got someone like with the experience of Kyle Cameron as well. That's another solid one. Yes, there are a few frees and loans that could potentially pose some kind of risk, but at the same time, I don't think they're overdoing it because, like I said, there's a stable League Two side there already. It's just they've brought in these loan players that can enhance the squad. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter. I'm sure they'll get another bite at it in January. They've still got a good squad there. It's just very smart squad building. So credit to everyone at Bromley for that.
Yeah, let's move on to 12th position. Bang on mid-table. Cambridge come here. Maybe one that's potential to go a little bit higher, but let's have a dive through, shall we? Let's have a look at some of their outgoings first. There's a lot of outgoings. Probably some that's needed, obviously, when you've been relegated. I think their clear aim has been to reset. There's a lot of good players in that I think could do a job in League Two have moved on. As a couple have gone to League One. And very deserving of those moves as well. I mean, Marco Morosi, I think, is too good for League One. I mean, Danny Andrew, I know he had a short spell at Stockport, but he's a very good. Oh, no, I think he went to Exeter, didn't he? I forgot to update that one. Whoops. But, I mean, look, Jordan Cousins in there, I think, is a very good signing for Eastleigh in non-league as well. And there's a lot of players that they've moved on, maybe could have done a job in League Two, but I think you look at some of the additions that they have brought in. Straight off the bat, Kelly Ruddock-Panzu is the big one. We were super impressed when that signing was made at Sam. Obviously, a long affiliation with Luton brings a wealth of experience in there. And there's some very good names for the level as well. Shane McLaughlin, Louis Apire can get a few goals. Kawasi was half decent at Salford on loan. And some experienced names in there. Dominic Ball, Ben Perrington. I think one of them is injured as well. There's maybe a couple, maybe not one or two that I'm not overly sold on, but that's nitpicking a little bit. Ben Knight feels like a pretty decent addition from some of the stuff I've seen. Jake Eastwood isn't terrible. I've seen worse goalkeepers. I'm curious to see how well he's done at the minute. I think mid-table I think for these is probably fair. There's a lot that's happened either way. I don't really have many complaints, to be fair. I think it still looks a pretty strong squad, despite the amount of players that have moved on. There's a lot of EFL experience and a lot of quality that have moved on, but I don't mind what they've done. I really don't. I quite, to be fair, I probably go as far as say I quite like what they've done. In parts as well. I just think there's maybe been a few clubs that have maybe done slightly better than them, but I think this is probably about right, to be honest. I'm not sure what you think.
Yeah, I mean, initially I was kind of skeptical with Cambridge's business, but I don't know. The more I'm looking at it now, I can kind of understand it a little bit more. Obviously, it is a lot of outgoings, and obviously they decided that's a necessary clear out for them to make. But to be fair, when you bring in the quality of a Belly Brodigan, Panzu, Shane McLaughlin, and some of the names there, understandable. I think they've gone for some proven quality, which is great. Uh, the only sort of concern I have is the goalkeeping position. As you've mentioned, Eastwood maybe not necessarily the most convincing. Uh, I think that whole sort of area could have been better, but aside from that, outfield, I think it looks pretty strong. With obviously with that many changes, probably going straight into their starting 11 as well. It could take time to click, and I think we haven't. Well, obviously it's very early in the season. We've probably not seen the best of anyone just yet. Uh, but I think particularly in Cambridge's case, I think there's more to come with this group. And if they can get it to click, they could be a very good side.
Okay, moving on to 11th. Crew Alexandra come here. I think, to be fair, they were quite busy on deadline day yesterday. I think it sort of lifted them up a little bit. In terms of outgoings, again, no one really spectacularly big. I mean, Ryan Cooney was always gone, really. Kane Hemmings, Chris Long have been at the club for a little bit now. And you see the players that they brought in. I think Reece Hutchinson was very much a little bit of an unknown at the time, but he's looked very good at times for um, Crew. We should probably put out Crew as well. 7-1 victory against Chesterfield in the Virtue Motors tonight. I mean that was a strong Chesterfield side that they put out as well. Ridiculous. But anyway, back on topic. I think Tommy O'Reilly seems a very good fit. He seems like a very Crew signing. Emre Tresgel, I think, is a very, very good pickup for League Two. Josh March has hit the ground running as well. Even some of the signings that they made yesterday on deadline day, I think Jay Mingy seemed, again, they just feel like good fits. And that's what I really like about it. Jay Mingy, Dion Rankine, who they signed on a permanent from Wigan, young winger. I mean, Louis Moult, if you keep him fit, you've got some good experience in the front line there. I don't mind what they've done. Again, it's one that I quite like. Would they have gone higher? I think I don't know. It's hard to say. I know they've got. I mean, they've kept some of their bigger players, but I think a lot of them, like I said, they've had a fair few injuries in that time. I think they've improved. I think there's no getting around that. I think the late push yesterday has sort of helped them with that. But there's a lot of names in there. I know I've talked about style. Some of them feel like a stylistically good fit, and that's what I quite like what Crew have done.
Yeah, I mean, when I first did my individual ones, I genuinely had no idea where to put Crew because yeah, some of the signings look good. Some I kind of don't know the most about. But I'm like, okay, I can kind of see why you'd go for it. Um, but yeah, I think as you say, it comes back to it just being a good fit. Like at Dons we had Tommy O'Reilly last season. Wasn't necessarily convinced of him at all. Didn't necessarily think he was a bad player. Just wrong situation, wrong club. Uh, it feels much more right that for him to be at Crew. Someone like Emre Tezgel, again, would have happily had him back at Dons. I thought he was a very good player. Just unfortunate that we had for him that we had Max Dean at the time, and you're not getting in the team ahead of Max Dean. I don't care who you are. Um, but no, Emre Tezgel is a very good player. A couple of years on from that now, I think obviously he's yet to start many games, but obviously he scored a hat trick in the EFL Trophy. Uh, I think given more time, he could be a very, very good signing. And then obviously Josh March just started the season fantastically well. Um, I think the only reason I didn't put them higher personally is just, I suppose there is an element of unknowns to some of these signings. Like you were saying, yes, O'Reilly, Tesco, yes, they're good signings. Well, yes, they are, but they're not proven enough to be able to objectively say, right, this will 100% work. This is going to make Crewe a fantastic team. Uh, but I think they're certainly on the right lines, and come the end of the season, I think this is one we could potentially look at and be like, okay, yeah, maybe they should have been a bit higher.
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. But I just feel like they're in a good setup. That's somewhat my thinking behind it. But I mean, we could be wrong. Not all signings are going to work, of course, and we know that more than anyone. Walsall coming at 10th, a big summer for them. Well, certainly one of change. We, of course, with them not getting promoted to League One, there was always going to be big interest for a lot of those players, and some big players have moved on. The likes of Taylor Allen, the likes of Liam Gordon, Ryan Sturks moved on. David Akagbu's moved on for a fee, but I didn't think he was much rated by Walsall fans anyway. There's a lot of players there that have moved on. Some of them probably rightly so, and of course some of them have moved up a level, in which we all thought Walsall should have been, but things happen in wonderful ways, don't they? But in terms of that's gone out interestingly. In terms of players I brought in, again, I quite like what they've done. I think they probably tried to do the best they can. I think there's a lot of I think maybe experiments with that, but ones I think I feel like a good fit. I think Aidan Flint, I think straight away, experienced League Two, yes please. Even the likes of Ryan Finnegan, the likes of I think Vincent Harper, I think Mason Hancock. I don't know what was the latest with an injury, but they just feel like good fits in some of the parts that I've seen them. Obviously, I think Rico Richards is probably a good one, but I think he's more come as a winger. I think, but if I can maybe try and get him into a team, I think he's a very good player for League Two. I think the obvious question marks was around the striker position. Obviously, I think they needed a bit of a overall. I think Presley started off okay. It's obviously unfortunate what's happened to Johnny Stuttle. He's gone back to Bournemouth, but Daniel Carnew's come in. I think there's some good players there. Certainly some you can get behind. I think some positions maybe they needed to strengthen more than others. Like I said, I do look at the striker position. I think he does look a little bit light, I'll be honest. But in terms of how they set up and how they play, I think there's some good additions that you can get behind. Lewis Warrington, I don't think I've mentioned yet either. I don't hate it. It was always going to be difficult for them, I think, with that much change. I mean, they've still got one or two good players on the banks. The fact they've still got Connor Barrett, by the way, I think is big. He's a player that should be playing in League One, just should be. I'm really impressed with him. I think there was talk about Stockport on deadline day yesterday, but nothing materialised from that. Yeah, like I think it was always going to be difficult for Walsall, whatever they did. And there's quite a bit to that I like. I have question marks over a couple of bits, but I wouldn't say I necessarily hate it. And the start of the season, not too badly as well either, which maybe is an early indication. But yeah, it's all right. I don't mind it.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of the incomings, and I'll touch on that in a second. I just don't like the amount of turnover. For me, that's too many good players leaving the club, and I appreciate that some of that's going to be inevitable after a season like the one they had. Uh, but I still think it's frustrating to let quite that many go. I know the Walsall fans have kind of said, "Oh yes, but these players have the wrong mentality. We're going to get new ones." I think there were players that probably could have been put back on the right track there if you'd kept hold of them, but obviously we'll never know but you do have a bunch of new ones. I think the Vincent Harper one is a very, very good pickup. I know against us at the weekend he was fantastic. Uh, Aidan Flint, proven promotion winner at multiple levels in the EFL, and then that experience as well. He's a fantastic signing. And again, probably one of the biggest signings in the division. Uh, Miles Roberts has had a very good start. Whether he can maintain that, we'll have to wait and see. But there have been some top loan keepers in League Two in the last couple of seasons. Maybe he could be the next one. There's a lot going on there. That's the only thing that I don't like is just there's a lot. Well, actually, I would agree with your concern over the striker positions as well. I think they probably could have done with a little bit more if they're planning on pushing towards the top end of the table. But then they do have a reasonable amount of quality in the rest of the side. It's just one of those things that you'd kind of hope they'd have that finishing touch of proven striker or a striker that will just go and do the job. They were saying that was going to be Stuttle, obviously can't be now, which is a shame. But I don't. There's certainly the makings of a good squad there.
Yeah, absolutely. Please don't come at us too much. I should probably remind us these are our opinions and these are based of an average score. We should probably point that out. These do not reflect what we think particularly. Right, in ninth place is a side that's not done a great deal, but I think their business has been very efficient. It's Fleetwood Town. Although you do look at it, I mean, Brendan Weirdo, big departure from Plymouth. It almost felt there was a sense of inevitability. He was too good for League Two. He deserved that move to League One. Phoenix Patterson, I mean, they got some good money for him from Stevenage. And again, no real departures. Maybe Mackenzie Hunt played his part here at times, and Danny Mayer has been decent to Ryan Broom. But I mean, you look at some of the incomings that they come in, and I just think, like I said, I've talked about style quite a bit in this, and I just feel like some of these are they just feel like a natural fit, especially for Pete Wild's side. Um, Will Davis is one that's hit the ground running. He's had a very good start to life as a Fleetwood player. I mean, Denver Hume signing from Grimsby, obviously in the League Two Team of the Year last year, and obviously I keep my thoughts to Denver to myself, but I mean, I don't hate that. It does feel like a good Pete Wild signing. Even Toby Malarkey was a player I didn't really rate here at Grimsby, but you can see why he's done it. In the right hand side of the back three is a good player there. I mean, certainly striker wise, James Norwood, Ched Evans. I mean, both of them experienced enough. We'll probably chip in with a few goals. I think Ethan Ennis had a loan spell with Doncaster. I think it was Doncaster. Could be wrong with that one. But one I really am going to keep an eye on is Jordan Davis. Keep him fit. I think he's a phenomenal footballer. He's got such a wicked left foot on him. He doesn't feel like he's working hard at times, but he's one of those that will just pull something off out of nothing. Like, he knows how he can hit a ball. And it was a shame we really never saw the best out of him because of injury. But honestly, keep him fit. I think he could be a very good signing. I really do think that. I do like him. There's not really much more to say, really. I think they're decent signings for what Fleetwood are trying to do. There's not a lot of it either. I've always been quite up in arms about Fleetwood's squad. I do quite like what they've already got, and they've kept the likes of, I think Ryan Graydon was of interest as well. I think keeping him's also a big plus. I think if you put them all together into the squad that they've already got, I think other than maybe Weirdo, of course, I think they have improved. I really do think that, and there's a couple of names I'll be keeping an eye on with interest, certainly.
Well, it comes back to stability. They've not gone too crazy with it. They have lost a couple of key players in Weirdo and Patterson, but then they've replaced them appropriately for the most part. Uh, there's a bit of proven quality there with someone like Denver Hume, with James Norwood as well, I'd say. And then there's some calculated risks. As you say, Davies can be a bit of a problem potentially injury wise, but quality is there. Yeah, it's just intelligent business. Uh, they didn't need to go crazy with it. They haven't. They had a side that was capable of grinding out results, just not quite consistently last season. And I think with these additions, they can start to improve on that now. And yeah, I like where they're going with it. They haven't ripped things up because they weren't in the top six or top seven last season. I like that. They've gone for a much more stable much more careful approach, and I think that could do them good in the long term.
Hmm. I mean, similar to what Gillingham have done, they come in eighth. In terms of outgoings, I mean, you look at it. I think Joe Gabode was the big one yesterday. Obviously moving on to Luton Town, but they'd have got a fair whack for that. Interested to see Jack Nolan was let go. I wonder where he's going to end up, because that's a very smart pickup for any League Two side. That, and I think some of the outgoings, I don't think you could really complain too much about. Maybe there's one that's sort of been, there's a couple of been half decent servants for the club. Mainly looking at Max Ermer. I think I said that right. Timothy Diang is a I don't mind Timothy Diang. I think for Dagenham and Redbridge National League South, that's a smart addition for itself. But looking at the players that they brought in, I really like some of that early business. Said Palmer Holden was very good at Newport. The fact they've got him permanently, I think, is a big plus. Sam Vokes brings that experience, of course, at the top end, and just feels like a Gareth Ainsworth signing. Andy Smith had a very good loan spell last season, and I loved him at Grimsby. I'm not, he's gone now on a permanent. And a couple of others, I think you noticed the two. There's a couple of loan lads in there that a couple of. I say a couple of loans. There's only really there's one youngster, but Johnny Smith. He gives Gillingham that's something different. Maybe it's probably the replacement for Joe Gabode for the season as well. But I think it also looks to me like Gareth Ainsworth is bringing the band back together, bringing in Gareth McCleary. What's he now? Is he like 38 or something like that? He's really cracking on, but it's that sort of experience that could be invaluable. Now, again, there's not a lot of business, but some that I really like, and it's efficient. I think you probably see that with how they started the season as well. It just feels very Gareth Ainsworth, and I'm all for it.
I mean, of course, it's very Gareth Ainsworth. He signed 2 Wycombe
I
players.
mean, Gareth McCleary, come on.
But
Sam
no,
Vokes.
as you say, it's again this stability. I think it can be such a crucial thing. You don't want to overdo it. Uh, Obviously, the situation with Max Ehmer was a bit of a strange one, but they can kind of look beyond that now. That's all done. I think losing Joe Bode is actually kind of a little bit of a big one, probably a bigger loss than they care to admit. I appreciate he hasn't scored that many goals, but he's got a lot of energy about him, and that can be quite a useful thing in forward areas. But again, Gareth McCleary proven quality as much as I don't like to admit it. Sam Boak's proven quality, although getting on a little bit now. Yeah, they've not gone over the top with it. There's a couple of signings I mildly appreciate. Uh, it's just good squad building again. It's just intelligent business. And yeah, I mean, at least so far this season, it's paying off for them. Obviously, we'll remain to see what happens. Right, remains to be seen what happens with Seb Palmer Holden. Could potentially be a game changer if he comes good. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
Okay, moving on to seventh place, and if you're watching this, if you've got good glasses, they might be needed for Swindon Town. A lot of incomings coming in. Let's have a look at some of the main ones. We know we've mentioned about Harry Smith's injury. I mean, they brought in Ollie Palmer, which again I think is the perfect replacement in a way. I did point that out the other week before that was signed. Ryan Tafazoli brings good experience, and they've got Tom Nichols on a permanent now. I think he's played games in midfield, which doesn't surprise me with Holloway. I mean, Billy Bowden brings that experience. Of course, he used to play for Swindon back in the day. There's a couple of exciting young lads. I think Jamie Knight LaBelle had a very good loan spell, I think, at Crewe previously. Um, there's a couple of names in there. I mean, Darren Oldacre did a solid job for Chesterfield. James Ball is a solid addition. I think he's injured, though, with that one. And of course, there was all raving about Jake Tabor when he made, but I think there's talks of maybe him going out on loan to a non-league side. In terms of some of their additions, I don't think there's really much you could really shout about. I think other than Botan Amin was one of their highly rated youngsters. He's gone to Norwich. I think he's sort of forced to move a little bit there, and Swindon have got some good money for him. But in terms of outgoings, I can't say there's really any big names. Really, there's a couple of names that have been at the club for a few years. I think Saidu Khan. I've always been impressed with Saidu Khan as a player. He's one I've always quite liked. Jake Cage has been there for a little bit of time now. Yeah, there's a lot to it. A couple of exciting young lads on loan as well, including Prince Will. I'm not saying his name; it's too late in the day. But some of it I like, some of it maybe that I feel there's maybe too much, maybe at times. But I think you can certainly understand it. Certainly with Ollie Palmer, obviously with that injury to Smith, they were quick to replace him with there. There's a lot of experience in there. There's a fair bit of quality. I think Munro started off okay as well, and Joe Snowden's looked all right in spells. I quite like what they've done. There's a lot of names in there, but there's certainly some of them you can certainly get behind, certainly on the experience side as well. It's interesting to see what Holloway's done.
Well, yeah, I think it's a case of every problem they've found, they've tried to fix it, and they've done a relatively good job of it. I'd say. Obviously, it's quite a heavy turnover, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that. But at the same time, the players they've lost are again kind of the fringe ones, and they've replaced them with players that can at least compete with what they already had in the building, and potentially improve on that. So the quality and depth is I'd say significantly improved. To be fair, um, I do still have question marks potentially over them defensively, but I think that's more of a systematic thing than necessarily a player thing. Just because they obviously like like their attacking play, and they like to be relentless with it. But some of these pickups look really good. Like as you say, even just the quick fix of losing someone like a Harry Smith, and Ollie Palmer's in straight away. There you go, problem solved. Yeah, it's just good business. Lots of EFL experience in there, mixed in with some high risk options, but uh, they're not relying on those risky players coming good. If those players don't work out, they've still got a very good squad there, and I think that stands them in good stead.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to 6. And it is Grimsby Town. Look, I'll be the first to say I've been really impressed with our transfer business. I think what we needed more than anything, if you had a look at it last season, was strength and depth. We didn't quite have enough to make that final step, and I think some of the options that we had near the end of the season played a big part in that. So we've gone and addressed that. I mean, in terms of outgoings, Denver Hume's been obviously the big one, but I think we've placed him quite quite easily. I'd probably go as far as say with two solid left backs in Jaden Sweeney and Reece Staunton. I've liked what I've seen from both of those. Jace Cabia has caught my eye early on. He looks like a real gem we picked up from non-league. I really like the signing of Christy Pym. He looks like he's been that goalkeeper we've been after for a long time. Still early days, granted, but I've liked what I've seen from Pym so far. And I thought he played really well against Man United, didn't he? Jamie Walker brings that experience. Justin Amaluza is maybe a little bit of a risk, but I think in terms of he brings something different. He adds to it's more squad depth more than anything. I'm really excited to see the potential of Zach Gilson in once he's back from injury. Same with Jude Belly made his debut tonight in the defeat to Bradford. And I've liked the little bits I've seen of him. And maybe a couple of other instances as well. Sam Lavelle, has got experience, maybe a couple of question marks on him, but I don't mind that so much. Clark Ottawa, of course, the man, the centre of attention at the minute in terms of where we registered him a minute late, and the fact we've now been fined 20 grand for it for the game against Man United. But again, just brings that squad depth in midfield. Neil Eccleston, right back, we needed one. Deadline day yesterday. Charlie Casper, another goalkeeper. It's always good to get one through the door, although I thought Seb Orton was excellent in the game tonight, actually. But I think going off all that, you've obviously got the players in the squad there. You've got the likes of Rose. You've still got the likes of Svan Thorson, who are still here. Obviously, once they're back to fitness, Rosie played a good part of that game. So He's slowly getting back to fitness. But I think the biggest thing I can take away from this transfer window is the fact that George McEachran is still a Grimsby player. I don't really know how that's happened. I don't really. It's the fact that there was barely any sort of public interest. I've got no doubt there would have been interest, but the fact that I've barely heard anything sort of surprises me. Um, and look, he's a terrific player, and I know I've been raving so much about it. There's no denying. I think we have improved, and our squad depth now. We can rotate quite heavily, and I still think it'd be a pretty good squad. I really like some of the stuff of what we've done here, and I honestly think us us being quite up in this ranking is absolutely justified. I think we have improved. The deadwood is gone, and we can really kick off now. There's a lot of it. There's no real flashy names in there. I think you probably look at it and you think, right, okay, there's no sort of caliber of MK Dons' signings on there or anything like that. But again, I'm talking about stylistic fits. And you see some of them for a David Artell system. There's certainly players you can get behind. Certainly a couple of risks, certainly a couple of unknowns. But just overall, I've been really impressed. And I think this has been one of the most impressive transfer windows we've done in a long, long time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The only major loss you had was Hume, and you've made a fantastic effort to replace him. Uh, most of the others that have left, yes, there are a couple of first teamers in there, but I'd argue in some of those positions you've upgraded, particularly the goalkeeping department. Christy Pym for me, top League Two goalkeeper, proven promotion winner, uh, one of the top keepers in the division, and he has been for a number of years. Uh, like you say, other than that, there's not necessarily big names in terms of the incomings, but it's just the fact that, well, under Artel and knowing the way that Grimsby operate, I trust these signings a lot more than, let's say, someone else signed them. It is probably the way I'd put it. I trust the system, I trust the process, and for what Grimsby are trying to do, I think this makes a whole lot of sense. Uh, the only slight concern in terms of depth would be midfield if certain personnel got injured. I've mentioned this to you before. If you did lose a McEachran for injury all of a sudden, does that team then start to struggle? Hopefully, never have to find out the answer to that. But uh, outside of that, I think it's a strong looking squad.
Absolutely. I won't bore you anymore to this. Let's move on. Because quite frankly, I want to go to bed. Salford have done a lot, and they're in fifth. I tell you what, I was pretty impressed with them at the back end of the window. I mean, the likes of Michael Rose, Matt Butcher, Brandon Cooper have got excellent experience from higher up. The fact they've got Matty Young back is huge for the season. George Grant, I think, shouldn't be playing in League Two. Alowu looks a very good pickup so far. And even someone like Daniel Udo, who they signed permanently yesterday on deadline day from Wycombe Wanderers, I think maybe could be the answer to maybe their striker issues that I know that Jake has gone on a little bit about. Ollie Turton as well brings good experience. And I mentioned about Nicholas Siri the other day. Very random sort of pickup, but one that I can certainly sort of get behind. And a lot I've not even talked about Jay Bird or anything like that. I really like what they've done, and there's no massive names in terms of outgoings. Curtis Tilt's moved on, but is he really a big fit? Because I think they've sort of replaced him pretty effortlessly. Conor McCalney was a good servant, but probably it was time for him to move on. A couple of they're just more fringe players that have moved on. Ryan Watson and Callum Morton's not really kicked on, has he? Which is a shame. Of course, Akiba Delican, of course, has moved on. He's still without a club. God knows what's happening to him. I think it's got to be more wages for him, isn't it? But I really like what Salford have done there. There's a lot of experienced names in that heads in that team. Salford have always been quite experience heavy in League Two, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also little bits of quality in there, like Udo, like a Kadeem Harris, like even a George Grant can bring you that something. I really like what they've done. They've dipped into the non-league market a few times. I know Barno have just come up with a Luwo. Cisse looks a half decent addition as well. I just see a lot of thumbs up in there personally.
Well, yeah, initially I would have been quite critical over some of the outgoings because I think there are players that would do a decent job in League Two there, but then as you say, it's just the quality of the incomings, and they've quietly had a very good window actually. What's Michael Rose doing in this league? There's so many strong players there, and it may take time for things to click. Uh, but with this group of players, I'd be confident that they could make that happen, especially under someone like Carl Robinson as well. Uh, I think Kadeem Harris in a side that performs better could become a very very good player as well. So yeah, I think there's just a lot to be positive about there. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if some of those outgoing players did go and do well elsewhere. Uh, and it could be like one that got away almost, but I think it'll be almost irrelevant to be honest, because I think just the quality of those incomings it is hard to look past, and based on that, you'd say they're probably in for a decent season.
Yeah, you probably think that. Um, right, let's move on to fourth. Of course, Tranmere Rovers come in there. Interesting that three of the FTF teams that come in there, sixth, fifth, and fourth. A fair bit of summer change at Tranmere. I think you see the players that have moved on. There's some names that have been at the club there for a little bit of time. The likes of Josh Hawkes, Regan Hendry, Kieran Morris, Luke Morris, they've all moved on. Um, but yeah, I think you look at some of the additions that they have made, and they just look very sensible additions. I really like the Nathan Smith signing. I really like the Richie Smallwood signing. He was in the team of the year, wasn't he? Noah Kenner looks a very smart pickup. Ethan Bristow, they know well. But I think what has sort of ranked this quite highly was, we've been going on for the fact that they've needed to sign a striker, and they needed to sign a pretty good one with that. I think Joe Ironside, I think stylistically and just for what he is as a player, he just feels like a very good fit for Tranmere Rovers, and they've got him tied down to a long-term deal. They needed that. They needed someone that's got that know-how, really, because I think you look at some of the names that they're not terrible options, but they're also not groundbreaking options either. A couple of lone lads in there as well. Taylor and Harris, Jaden Joseph's in there. There's a lot of good names in there. Even someone like Patrick Brough brings good experience. I really like what they've done. I think they have improved. I think there's always still, you've always got to be wary with Tranmere. I think certainly in terms of one or two question marks, and I think sort of the goal scoring situation still remains a little bit. They'll be hoping that someone like Ironside does hit the ground running, but if you look at it on paper, if you look to break it down, I actually think they've had one of the better transfer windows of the summer compared to some of the other League Two teams. I just like what they've done. I think it's really smart, but also really true. I feel like to the sort of like the Tranmere way, so to speak, if that's even a thing. I like what they've done. I've been impressed with them this summer.
Absolutely. The Deadwood is pretty much gone, and based on last season, they definitely had a lot of that. So quite a few changes. I think in this case is kind of fair enough. The only one I'd say there that is potentially a loss is Regan Hendry, but then Richie Smallwood. So that's kind of fine. Smallwood is a very very good player, and that was kind of alarm bells ring straight away of Tranmere could actually be quite good this season. Uh, and then, as you say, I think they've shored up the defense, lots of defensive options, much better depth, uh, and then it's just the Ironside, and that's kind of the icing on the cake. I would have concerns in terms of depth in the final third. Uh, but if you can keep those key players fit up front, like someone like an Ironside, then yeah, it looks like a very, very strong squad, and I think they're going to be quite tough to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. Down to the top three, and you probably guess where, or who these are. Bristol Rovers coming in third. Again, a lot of a summer change for them, of course, with them dropping down into League Two. Let's have a run through of some of the signings that they have brought in. I mean, in goal, Luke Southwood, excellent goalkeeper for the level. You look at their defence, Jack Sparks, Alfie Kilgore, good defenders for the level. Macaulay Southern House scored a pearler at Little Park the other day. To be fair to as much as I sort of hate to admit that. And then you look at some of the others, you go up the pitch a little bit. Josh McEachran, very good experience. at a higher level. Even Alfie Chang that they brought in on loan on deadline day was one I was massively impressed with. I've not even mentioned Stephen Negru as well in defence. In League Two, that's one of the best signings of the day, without a doubt. I think he's too good for League Two, and the fact that a team like Bristol, a League Two side has picked him up. I mean, Bristol Rovers, they've just shored up that defence even more. I know that Jake is a massive fan of his. And you look at some of the striking options they have. I mean, Eris Harrison is a player that they know well. Fabrizio Cavane, is it? Is that how you say it? Certainly brings that unknown, but it's certainly an interesting one to keep an eye on. I think Freddie Saka on loan from Plymouth looks an interesting pickup as well. I know we mentioned, Kakpila Pata as well on loan from Barnsley. It's just strong. Even Ryan Howley, just strong additions. Yes, all right, they've lost a fair few players in there. I think Kofi Shaw, youngster gone to Brighton for good money. I think it was probably a clear out they needed to do because they were really poor in League One. I mean, Connor Taylor was probably the other big one going to Wickham on a permanent deal. But the likes of Chris Martin's gone. The likes of Giovanni Brown's gone. I mean, Grant Ward. I mean, you can't deny they've improved. And I think yesterday, some of the stuff they did on deadline day sort of just tipped it over because I was pretty unsure where to put Bristol Rovers in. But they was excellent on deadline day yesterday. I think they brought in 4 players and I think every signing has got an element of, right, okay, they look strong. And yes, don't let this somewhat slow start to the season fool you. I know they've just picked up back-to-back wins in the league, but if that's the sort of signings that they're making, then I've certainly got high hopes for Bristol Rovers, as I sort of expected to have at the start of the season. I think there's certainly I've got a better feeling about that now, as maybe the first couple of games concerned. Maybe slow start, quite a lot of players coming in, can maybe expect that, but I think they've had a terrific window.
They really have. When I said earlier on I wanted Notts to show ambition, this is what I meant. This is exactly what I wanted to see them do. Bristol Rovers haven't necessarily had to break the bank for any of these. I'm sure some of them will be on, decent wages, but they've got some very good players there without having to, spend all that much to get them. Josh McEachran, very, very good player, probably could be in League One. Luke Southwood could be in League One. You could say that for a number of these players. There's some very good depth there, particularly in defensive areas. I'd say again, final third could potentially be an issue. I don't think there's necessarily a 20-goal season striker there, but at the same time, I do think there's 3 or 4 players I look at and go, you know what, they could probably get 10. And if all of them get 10, then that's probably more than enough. It's just very strong. As you say, the turnover, there's a lot of turnover there, which is kind of a little bit of a concern. Would explain the slow start. But again, perhaps necessary. There are players they've let go that would probably do a job. But to be fair, if they're going to show this level of ambition, then yeah, fair enough, let them go. All I'm saying is I'm feeling quite confident about my prediction of having Bristol Rovers in second right now for the league table come May time.
Absolutely. Let's move on to second place. Chesterfield come in it. And again, they're just strong. Just strong. I don't really know what you can really say. I mean, Dylan Marconde, him on a permanent, huge, straight off the bat. Ryan Sturck, I think, is a very smart pickup for them, and just feels like a good fit. I feel like good fit is a term that I've used a lot so far. We'll continue to do. Ronan Darcy, again, very good signing, albeit on loan. James Berry going back there, probably the move he needed to maybe sort of ignite his career a little bit. Sort of stalled going to Wickham. He's not really played much there. And some of the loan lads, I think, have started to make an impact as well. I think Tanton, Dibley Diaz, the players that I don't really know much about, but I think under the coaching of Paul Cook can really bring the best out of them, and he certainly fit into a good system. I've not even mentioned Adam Lewis either. I think that's a very smart pickup, albeit doesn't seem one that's massively extraordinary. And again, you look at the players that they have left, right? Okay, the likes of Ollie Banks, Darren Oldacre, Ash Palmer's moved on, but were they really big names? Maybe Oldacre played a fair bit last season. I mean, Kane Drummond's gone to Oldham, Ryan Coulclough's left, Hulson's gone out on loan, and Paddy Madden's gone out on loan. I think, again, probably the only concern I have with Chesterfield is probably the defensive side. I think Malik Owolabi Belair, I think I said that right. I think he's a centre back. I'm not too sure. He's coming in from Canada, but that'll be done in January. They've signed him on a pre-contract agreement. But I maybe have one or two question marks with the defence still. But going forward, I think it's certainly glittered with some quality options, Lee Bonus as well. Of course, going up with Will Grigg and a couple of others as well. Just they set the tone. Really, they set the tone going with Dylan Marconde, which is one of the best signings in League Two, without a doubt. This transfer window, I do get the sense that they have improved in quite a lot of aspects, and they'll certainly be a fun side to watch. Hopefully, it won't be anything like the 7-1 defeat they've just had to crew tonight in the Virtue Motors. Hopefully, that was just a one-off, but it's a pretty alarming one-off if it was, because it still looks like a pretty strong side. But I guess we'll have to see going forward as well, isn't there? So, yeah, a couple of concerns, but overall, again, just very, very good, and I've been impressed again.
I mean, it says a lot when you can loan out someone like Paddy Madden as if it's nothing. That kind of tells you how good the depth is in forward areas for Chesterfield. And as you say, there are some very, very good pickups there. Mark Ande, Lewis, you can't really argue with these signings. They're proven at the level, and they're going to do a very good job for them. Um, there are a couple of weird pickups that they've gone for. It is probably the only way I can put it, where it's kind of like, well, why have you done that? Didn't necessarily need that player. Maybe a bit of an unnecessary signing, but I guess we'll wait and see how their squad develops over the coming months. As you say, the only concern for me is the defence, and more so the centre back position. What happens if Dunkley or McFadzean gets injured? I think if either of those are missing, the the quality in the defence drops quite significantly, I'd say. So perhaps maybe slightly disappointed they didn't bring in someone that could push those two a little bit more. But that is nitpicking, because that is essentially saying, look, if that player gets injured, you've got a problem. That's something that might not even happen. Those two could potentially play all 46 games, and it would just never have any impact. But like I said, I like most of what they've done. It's just one or two tiny holes you can pick in that team, and that's almost clutching at straws when you've got players like your Mark Andes, your Dunkleys, your McFadzean, Sturk. You could keep going. It's just a very strong squad.
Right, let's move on to number one, shall we? And let's just do this quickly because I want to go to bed. If it'll even do it right. In number one, or at number one, it's MK Dons, and I'm just going to describe it in one word: ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, kind of just having our own signing of the season competition going on here. I was kind of saying to you earlier, I genuinely don't know which one of like. There's 4 or 5 there I could pick out and say, you know what, that's the signing that's the best signing in League Two this summer. Uh, and I'm struggling to choose between them even now. It's kind of just summarised by the final one of Kane Wilson. As those rumours sort of started circulating, you had Derby fans saying, "Oh, he'll never go to you. He won't drop 2 divisions. All the rest of it. He's a championship player." And shortly afterwards, here he is playing for us, and that's kind of been the case with a good number of these players. It's a case of the depth is a lot better than it was. You can have players like Dan Crowley sat on the bench. You can have players like Scott Hogan not even in the squad, and that's with players like Lawrence Maguire and and Aaron Collins injured at the minute. Uh, so the scary thing is you've not actually seen the best MK Dons 11 play a game yet. There is potential to have Aaron Collins, Nathaniel Mendez-Lang, Callum Patterson in the same attack at some point this season. And that's if you somehow find a way to bench Rashawn Hepburn Murphy, which at the minute looks difficult because I really like the look of him. In terms of outgoings, we've not really had anyone go that we didn't want to go, essentially, aside from Dean Lewington, but that's just more just out of the fact that of what he means for this football club, and he's still around, taking charge of one of the development squads anyway. So yeah, I genuinely couldn't be any happier with the window we've had. It's possibly the best one we've ever had.
And on that note, we're ending it there. I'm not going to add any further comment because, I mean, what can you say to that? I mean, give me a break. Right, so that's where we'll end it. Of course, as I've mentioned numerous times in this podcast, these are our average ratings together. So please don't crucify us. I know we've mentioned a few that have maybe probably deserved a bit higher, some that deserved a bit lower. We've gone on for ages. I'm going to wrap this up very quickly. Of course, thank you guys for listening as always. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, download the podcasts. Of course, let us know what you think. And thank you for the support. As always, we'll be back over the weekend for our review show. We'll do the feature then. I think it's better because the time is, well, it's nearly 2:45 in the morning, and we're stupid enough to be talking about how good MK Dons' signings are at this time. You can't say we're not committed, and I don't really want to give MK any more credit considering we play them at the weekend, and I kind of want to win. Look, there's that side to it. Let's wrap it up there. I need bed. My throat is still no better, as you could probably maybe can tell in this podcast. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Fourth Tier Fever. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care for now.